Hello Internet, I'm Dan.
And I'm Chaz. This is the Wine is Serious Business Show, episode 105.
We got a new guest tonight. We've been friends with Scott here for a long time, drank some good wine together. One of our internet friends for the most part. We're on a couple forums together, Cellar Trackers, on Wine Berserkers from time to time. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you like about wine?
Got into wine about 12 years ago while I was in Colorado, and when we moved to the Northwest, found myself landed smack between the Willamette and the Walla Walla Valleys. Kind of a nice spot to be in for pretty much any wine you want to drink. So really my palate gravitated more towards Cab and Syrah, so I've been drinking Walla Walla, Yakima Valley, Columbia Valley pretty heavily, and that's why I'm trying to get you guys interested in it, because you guys are too stuck in the Willamette.
And there's some truth to that, and we'll get into the details of what we're tasting. Just to keep it short, we got a lineup of wines from RaSa. We're going to get into this wine right away. This is the Lyricist, 100% Riesling. We did the Composer not too long ago, really liked it. Both Chaz and I were really excited to find out that he's got another Riesling coming out. One of our friends, Justin, has spoken a lot of praise about this wine, so I was really excited to see that it was in part of the sample lineup. Yeah, disclosure too, these were all kindly sent to us as samples by RaSa themselves, so thanks. It's a little treat to get to
Much
try
appreciated,
this
yeah.
Thanks to Scott for bringing it out.
This is 2010.
2010.
Out of Columbia Valley.
Lyricist.
Yep.
So, if I remember right, from talking with Billo Neravain's the owner of RaSa, he and his brother Pinto formed RaSa a couple of years ago. I believe one of them, I think Billo, is also trained as a classical pianist, so that's why a lot of the Composer and the Lyricist have had labels that have really taken to that artistic side of their brain. Musical scores, etc. on the label, where the other wines are going more towards the mathematical side of their exposure that I'll talk about later.
Nose is like really, really fresh and sweet at the same time, right? Like nectarines, peaches.
Yeah, and like crisp peaches, right?
Yeah,
like still really got some good firmness, like real fresh.
But a good amount of sweetness coming through the nose. You definitely know this is not a dry Riesling by the aromas on the nose.
Exactly. I mean, what made me fall in love with this last March? No, actually, last May when I was there. Unlike a lot of the Rieslings in Washington that are done in a real dry style, I'm more a fan of the German style, and this had a lot of botrytized fruit. So, first time I smelled it, I was like, okay, this is really approaching what I like about Riesling.
I'm going to follow up on that. So I've been drinking a lot of German wines over the summer, and there really are echoes of some of these really fine German dessert wines in there. That touch of botrytis in the text sheet he was reading earlier was over 40% of the grapes involved in this wine were botrytized, and it's really showing. You get a little touch of that apricot in there. I'm getting a little bit of mandarin orange, but it's this heavier sweetness that comes from botrytis. You get that in sauternes, you get that in really nice dessert Rieslings.
Yeah, totally.
Smells fantastic.
And the minerality and the really good apricot flavors are just washing across the palate, kind of settling out through the sides. Just really clean and delicious fruit.
Yeah, the mouth-watering nature of it, the finish, you just feel your tongue literally watering constantly for 30 seconds after swallowing this. Lots of lime, lots of pineapple and mango.
Yeah, getting like the pineapple, the lime or the orange zest. It's like a little bit of tartness on the finish, and that acid, that citrus acid, is really making the mouth water after each sip. It's fantastic, but there's still a good amount of sweetness that's lending to a lot of body on the palate, which I really like, right?
And this is right around room temp too, now. We started a little bit chilled, tried it out, and it's come up a little bit, and you're getting a lot more nuance out of the fruit with that. You're also getting a little more fullness of body, which is definitely there. This is definitely a lot of presence to this Riesling. It's not goopy or syrupy at all, because it's got that structure with the orange zest that he was talking about, as well as acidity that really settles in, and as it's warmed up, the acidity really has a lot more effect on the back end.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know what I like about RaSa's Rieslings, Billo has a viticulture side of his education. He actually teaches viticulture at the Walla Walla Community College up in
Awesome.
Walla. So I mean, you know, the guy's pretty sharp in that regard. And you know, where a lot of people, the white wine is kind of their, yeah, we have to have a white wine on the menu, you know, of our offerings. This particular wine, I know the two vineyards the grapes came from. One vineyard they did 3 passings in fruit collecting, and the other vineyard they did 2 passings. So, you know, they're investing the time to try to get, you know, the best quality wine out of what they're really doing here. And I personally love it. I think it shows different than any other Washington Riesling I've had.
Isn't that what they do in Germany and Sautern to
And
make sure
only,
they got
and
the
only
right
like the
clusters,
top
right?
estates too, right? Like
Yeah.
multiple harvesting passes is very rare. Just due to the labor costs involved, right? You have to train a lot of people very, very specifically to what sort of berries you're looking for, what's acceptable.
Yeah.
There's a, you know, that's a real commitment, not only to quality in general, but into having a specific vision of what you want this wine to be.
Exactly.
And it's great to see people putting that kind of effort in.
I think the vision is good. The wine turned out really delicious.
Something's nice on the palate, man. It's just got a nice little evolution. Sits well, and I think it'd be approachable to a lot of people too.
Yeah.
And if you like German Rieslings, you'll definitely not have a problem with this at all. This definitely has like just nuances of stuff that reminds me from Germany. Definitely the sweetness.
And while this clearly isn't a Search for the Great American Riesling show, this is right up there. This is amongst the best Rieslings I've had from the United States. I'm going to go 90 plus on it. Digging it.
Yeah, 91 points for me. As Dan would say, one of the best American Rieslings I've ever had. It's awesome, and definitely more in my style. Like, I prefer the sweeter Riesling, and this has complexity and lots of just delicious flavors, and is very well put together. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm pretty much right in that range, 90, 91. Yeah, I could drink this without question. I love Thai food. I'd throw this on Thai food, throw it in summer barbecue. It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so next wine.
Wine number 2. You can pronounce that Latin.
Wine number 2, Vox Populi.
Alright.
I believe I'm pronouncing it right. Latin for voice of the people. So the perspective on this wine, 100% Mourvedre. RaSa in their next wine we'll get to, QED, used Mourvedre as one of the blends, one of the
Blending grapes.
blending grapes.
Yeah.
So anyway, as they were tasting through the barrels, a lot of their friends were tasting this, and they just basically said, why are you planning on blending this? This stands on its own as an exemplary example of Mourvedre, so look at bottling it singly. So that's what we have now. They said, voice of the people have spoken, hence the label.
Nice. And I'm not terribly experienced with Mourvedre. I know I've had a few single variety bottlings of this before, but not terribly
Very
experienced.
small amount,
Yeah.
yeah. I think one from Washington that I tasted, and one from...
I've had Argentinian, I think,
Mourvedre.
and or not.
Oh, in Spain, Monastrell is Mourvedre, right?
I
In
believe,
Spain,
yeah.
I think
so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I think you're right.
So definitely, right. We're not doing a gentle transition from white wine to red here at all. We're jumping right into the deep end of the pool.
Rinse your mouth out.
The big. Oh, okay. Yeah, there's like big full reds.
Now, where earlier this
Al
was
Warren tune for this, yeah.
this was just a monstrous explosion of chocolate-covered cherries on the nose. That's calmed down quite a bit. It's given a little bit more nuance now.
Yeah, it has. This on a pop and pour. This was we tasted through the wines initially just to make sure they were all settled and decent. Yeah, it was way higher toned, way more forward than it is now. It's settled down quite a bit.
I'm getting some cool earthy notes here that kind of remind me of like late in the summer when things are dried out a lot. You got some like dried out grass, some dried out leaves on the ground. a little bit of cherries, like some cherry skins, but they're also maybe a little dried a little bit, right? You can buy the dried cherries you can put in with your trail mix, or maybe put in with your granola, and there's a little bit of that going on.
Yeah, it's like the dried cranberries, dried cherries sort of thing going on.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a lot more, almost even like sophistication to the nose, where before it was really like boisterous.
Very
and
exuberant,
like,
yeah.
And now it's...
It was like a Valentine's Day wine earlier, and now
Yeah.
it's kind of coming into a winter day wine.
Yeah, it's a little more contemplative.
Still a good amount of dark chocolate on it though. That's for sure. That's always going to be there. Neat nose. It smells good.
Getting a lot of more of a black cherry now than earlier. It seemed like more black fruits. Now it's moving a little more towards cherry for me.
I'm totally agreeing with that. A little bit of that chocolate sensation on the mid palate again.
Yeah.
You think that comes from barrel treatment, probably? Because that seems to be,
Probably.
yeah,
You
a little
know.
bit. And it's not overwhelming, like it integrates well with the fruit.
So he's pretty diligent in his barrel program. You know, he doesn't get real over the top with a lot of new oak. He lets each wine speak to him about what the oak program should be. Almost all of his wines, if I recall correctly, are done with native yeast fermentation. He's really meticulous in controlling, you know, making sure the native yeasts aren't going haywire. Intervening if he has to, but I believe most of his wines usually go through native yeast fermentation pretty cleanly.
And that's pretty cool. Yeah, I think I may have mentioned it on the show before, but I was reading a great thread on Wine Berserkers where people were talking about how the native yeast strains of any particular area are probably very underrepresented when people talk about terroir, right? Because the flavor components that yeast can bring through the fermentation process are very significant. And when you talk about making wine in the Loire and making wine in Napa and making wine in Mendoza, right, the yeast strains are going to be dramatically different, and that's really an essential component of terroir, and that's an idea that I really buy into. Of course, I haven't read a lot of studies on that. I don't have a lot of scientific knowledge to back that up, but it's something that makes a lot of sense. So the idea of native yeast fermentation, you know, appeals to me aesthetically. It's something I like to hear about, you know, wineries in the Northwest, because I think it gives us a chance to learn about something unique that we can do here.
Yeah, yeah, and the other big ones, you know, that everyone knows that do native yeast fermentations. You know, Cayuse is the big one, and you know their wines, the noses on those are absolutely crazy. You know, and it's what attracted a lot of Cayuse fanatics to it. So it's interesting to see more winemakers in Walla Walla starting to go that route.
Some good acidity here too. The tannins kind of like build up slowly, they never get too big. And I didn't pick up on this much acidity before, but this dried cherry flavor kind of lingers on the palate, and the acidity is really drying things out across the back end. Getting just a touch of heat, but the acidity is dominating the structural component of this. Heat's not really causing much trouble, and I dig it. This is a nice approachable dark wine.
The red fruit flavors here are just, they linger for so long on the palate. Like the what I call mid palate length. It's like typically on most wines there's a definite transition from when the wine is in the mouth to the wine when you swallow the wine. Like the finish begins. Like this lingers for a lot longer than it feels like it should when once you swallow it. And for me, it's like Dan was saying, like dried cherries, but like tart young blackberries, and
I can see that, yeah.
and just a little bit of like sort of like a dirt roady component, like a little bit of gravel or something that's showing just a touch of minerality for me. It's fantastic, and then the acidity is very, very long and in touch with all of the fruit. Very well put together. Yeah. Delicious.
I think if anyone buys it, you know, put it in a decanter or leave it open for a couple hours, it certainly benefits from that.
And sample it.
Yeah,
every hour.
Yeah, take a little bit on it
because this has changed distinctly.
But I believe it's their wine that typically sells out the fastest each year. Ironically, you know, a single vineyard Mourvedre. But you know, I think it's a pretty great example of that varietal.
And it's nice to see him kind of like, you know, commercially rewarded, I guess, for doing something unconventional. You know, kind of listening to his clients, I guess. That's pretty cool.
His friends and clients.
Yeah. So cool stuff. I'm gonna go 89 points there, and I want to do this like with a very distinct caveat. If you're looking to drink Pinot Noir, this isn't what you should be drinking, right? This is a big, dark wine, but, you know, if you're looking for that style, I think this really delivers, and it's got like some interesting earthy characteristics that I'm feeling.
Absolutely. I like the flavors here are fantastic. The build is very good. I like everything about it. 91 points for me. It's absolutely delicious.
Yeah, I'm right in there at this point. Earlier, I might have been more towards Dan at an 89. I've bumped it up a little bit. It's really rounded out on my palate. I'm a big Rhone varietal fan, so you know, going away from a Syrah to a pure Mourvedre is an interesting experience, and I like having that intellectual aspect of trying something unique like this. So 91 easy.
Nice.
All right.
We're into your QED. Flagship, right?
Yep. So this was the wine that initially turned you on to RaSa, guys, or was this? You talked about this a lot earlier.
Yes.
I had some things to say about the QED.
Okay, so our third wine is QED. I'll try not to butcher the Latin Quad Erat Demonstratum, which so Billows and Pintos as well. They're both highly educated technical guys. Billow has a bachelor's in applied mathematics and electrical engineering from MIT, a master's in electrical engineering from Stanford. And then he went and got his master's in viniculture and enology from UC Davis, you know, the big California wine school. So you know, no shortage of left brain talent on Billow. QED is an abbreviation most mathematicians will put at the end of a proof, saying I proved what I set out to prove. So this being the first wine he released, the 07 vintage of this wine, I fell in love with it when I went to Walla Walla the first time. I had a friend introduce me to Billow, said, hey, I know this guy who's moved to Walla Walla, he's making wines, you really ought to drop by and taste his stuff. I went to Walla Walla, tasted through Billow's stuff, and what I was most impressed with is for a first release by a winemaker I'd never heard of, you know, who, you know, there's lots of people who say I'm going to start making wine because I like wine. The QED floored me. It was Northern Rhone all the way. The first time I smelled it, it was like bacon and road tar and blackberries, and it was just so complex. And I'm like, seriously, this is your first wine? And that's really what we're looking at.
That's exciting, yeah. Very, very dark in glass.
So this is just version number 2 of the first wine, right? This is the second run.
Exactly. So predominantly Syrah, 5% Mourvedre. I can't remember the Grenache component, and then a little bit of 2% Viognier for some aromatics. But
this wine has changed substantially since the first time we tried it. I'm smelling the bacon fat big time on the nose.
And super dark, right?
Yeah.
Like this has got a little bit of the asphalt and the black fruits, like.
right.
That's coming through more for me now than when we taste it right on a pop and pour. And
Yeah.
the nose is killer on this. This is
Well, and
awesome.
like I told you, I had a bottle of the 07 open on a kitchen counter for 3 days. I opened it, had a glass or two one night. Life got in the way, didn't get back to it for 2 whole days, came back to it, and it was 3 times the wine it was on night number 1. So, you know, these have some stuffing in them. Bill talks a lot about, there's a technical term for oxygen exposure that the wine will go through, and he manages that very carefully to both preserve the aromatics as well as the ageability and the palate of the wine. And, you know, if what he's saying in that makes sense, then, you know, the ability for this to sit on a counter getting new oxygen to it, where another wine might have fallen apart is just evident. And, you know, 2 hours in, this is just getting great.
And I'll say that it's evident on the aromatics alone. Like, these wines pop out of the glass.
They do.
And they're enjoyable, right? Even if I didn't drink a drop, these are an enjoyable wine experience. Which I can't say, you know, about everything, and it's really nice to see about multiple wines.
Now, if only we could get like some French perfume makers to start turning this into perfume for women, you know, then we kind of kick up a whole new level of wine appreciation. You smell pretty.
My mind's going to the places.
Yeah, we'll just say, Chaz censoring himself. I've learned to appreciate it when he makes that decision. So thanks, Chaz.
Cheers. That was awful.
Man, it's totally like you got a couple cigars, you throw them in a big bag of plums, and you set them out in the middle of the street, and you just run over them a couple times. That's with your car. That's just what it smells like.
Big time tobacco aromas with the black fruit. It's
Love it.
Yeah.
This smells fantastic.
And at a relatively great price point, in my opinion. There's a lot of wines out there in the $30 to $50 price range. I think QED is priced right around $40, $45. Again, for when I buy wine, I look at, okay, what can I enjoy now, but also more along the lines of what can I sit on for 4, 5, 7 years. And this is a wine I don't hesitate to sit on because I know it's got the bones in it to go for that long and probably improve over that time.
And there's even a little bit of curiosity, like what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like the potential's there, but even in the couple hours we've had it open, it's evolved so much. So I'd be really interested to see what this is like 5 years down the road.
Another fun thing about Billo and his interest in communicating with his customer base. We didn't look at the corks, but all of the corks have his cell phone number printed on it, and it says call the winemaker. So I actually took a bottle of the 07 QED to a dinner with a Napa winemaker a couple months ago, and he was so impressed with it. We're sitting at dinner, and he's like, "This is some darn good juice," and he's a Napa winemaker. I said, "Well, let's call Billo and tell him." And literally looked at the cork. There was his cell phone number. We called him. We had a 15-minute conversation with him while we're drinking his wine.
Wow.
So
That's pretty exciting.
again, a lot of people get their head up in the clouds when they become winemakers. I kind of like how they're approaching their model.
Yeah, and doing it because it's something he loves to do. The acidity on this is striking me now, and it didn't before. And actually, I'll go into that too. So we like to talk about, I guess, the state of the wines when we get into them. So we opened these about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago, with the idea being we get a bunch of samples. We're going to taste through them first, make sure, see what we like. So because we don't want to throw somebody who sends us a sample under the bus, on a show on the spot. That doesn't. That's no good for us, that's no good for them. You guys don't want to hear us talk about bad wines. So we're like, yeah, let's check them all out. We get through the whole lineup, we're like, what should we do on the show? Like, well, maybe this is my favorite, but
Just do all.
I really don't have anything bad to say about any of them. Like they're all enjoyable and they're all interesting in their own unique way. So let's do the whole show. So they've all been open for about 2 hours, lots of air. We've had the pop and pour experience with all of them, and so now this is all like the second time through, and it's fascinating to see. And I expect, like, as we get further up the line, they're even more complex, so the changes are going to be even more dramatic.
Yeah.
And tying back into where I was going originally, the acidity didn't strike me the first time that we drank this, but it really is settling in from the mid-palate now, drying things out, playing really well with that dark fruit.
The structure is very, very nice, whereas before it was almost overpowering the fruit a little bit before, and now it's like, it's not that the fruit is mellowed out, it's almost like the gaps that were missing before for me in it have been filled in, and I'm getting like more earthy aromas. There's definitely like a damp earth sort of thing going on with the black fruit that I'm getting, but it lingers through the structure into the finish for a considerable amount of time still. Yeah, delicious.
It's picking up a lot of tar and
Yes.
and some of those tannic structure on the back palate now that
Almost like mud or something.
yeah,
Like,
it's a thicker palate.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's awesome.
Get a really good citrus note that settles in even pretty early, and it's kind of underneath the dark fruits. I think some of the dark cherries probably come a little bit from this. A little bit of red fruit, maybe a little bit of raspberry too, and the citrus that kind of lingers underneath everything while the structure sets in at the back. Nice.
Nice wine.
Drink it all night.
I have a
long.
feeling we're going to be saying this over and over. 91 points
Wow.
for me.
Yeah. Same thing. 91.
Yeah, delicious. And picked up from where I like it better now than I did on a pop and pour.
Yeah.
So.
This is the wine that got me into RaSa. I love this wine, so I'm probably at like a 92 on it. It's one of my go-to wines.
Nice.